Today on No Rules Reviews, I'm going to be looking at Matryoshka. If you don't know what Matryoshka is, and I do apologise to any Russians if I'm butchering the pronunciation here, Matryoshkas are just Russian nesting dolls. Players are going to compete as Matryoshka collectors, vying to have the best collection. And of course, as we all know, collectors decide who has the best collection by deciding how many victory points their collection is worth. In practice, Matryoshka is a set collecting, hand managing, tableau building, trading game, designed by Sergio Halaban with a playtime of around 20 minutes. It's a lovely little small box card game, so let's dive right in. So in this tiny little box, you're going to get 70 cards, 10 different suits, 1 to 7 from each set of Matryoshkas. And the 1s are nice and little, tiny little Matryoshkas, and the 7s are the biggest ones, right, so they can all nest nicely. You're going to score your points in a fairly predictable way. Runs in a colour will score you points, sets of the same number will score you points, a long run of 6 is better than 2 runs of 3, very similar ideas to lots of other set collection games. Something maybe like this where you're scoring lots of rows and lots of columns is what you're aiming for. When you're collecting your sets, Matryoshka is going to incentivise you to collect rows over columns because a row of 5, 6 or 7 will score some additional bonus points, whereas a column won't. However, it kind of incentivises the columns because those rows have to be consecutive. A row of 3 with a gap and then 2 more is only 6 points, whereas that row of 5 is scoring 11 points. A column of 5 is always scoring you 10 points. So what is it that makes Matryoshka stand out over other set collection games? Well, the main gimmick of the game, and I'm not using gimmick in a derogatory way, I think all set collecting games have kind of some sort of gimmick to differentiate them from one another. And Matryoshka's gimmick is the way the set collection is done. So the player whose turn it is will offer a card, and they must do this. They can't say, I'm happy with my hand. They'll offer a card up to be traded. And every single other player offers a card for it, but that's face down. And only the player whose turn it is allowed to have a look at that card. And they'll accept an offer, and no one will know exactly what they've picked. The other difference is that at the end of each round, you will pick up your current tableau, and then put down a slightly bigger one. And those two mechanisms combine in quite an interesting way. The tableau that you're building, the tableau in front of you that other players can see, indicate what you're trying to collect, so they know what to offer you in trades. But do you really want to display that you have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7? You know, your paltry runs of 3 are scoring you 4 points each, but if someone gave you that 4 to connect them, you'd be suddenly at 19. No one's going to make that trade. So maybe I just want to display, the 3 and the 5 and the 6 to say, yeah, look, I'm looking for these, but then those other cards are taking up space in my hand, and I definitely can't afford to offer them for trade, because what if they get accepted? Of course, this is an issue that, Arboretum and Lost Cities and other set collection games might have. Every card in your hand is great, and you don't want to get rid of any of them. And there's kind of a bit of a bluff, maybe even. You're saying, I'll just chuck this at someone who is not interested in it at all, and you're sitting there praying they don't accept it, because the card is so valuable to you. And it's really interesting to kind of try and guess what people are looking for, because you aren't seeing what they get to accept, you're just seeing the tableau they've put in front of them. There's a little aspect of maybe some hidden but trackable information, where you know what someone had last round or the round before. But how do you know they haven't offered that to someone else in a trade? So you're kind of second guessing exactly what other people want. And I mean, that really is kind of the whole of the game, but it's a really, really interesting way it works, and it does lead to some really nice dynamics, and it's something I think you have to try. It makes the game a total blast. So let me just talk about a couple of the negatives really, really quickly. The quality of the cards, if you have a look at the ones I have here, you can see there's some wear on them, and it didn't take long for that to start showing. Now maybe that just says I was playing the game a ton and it was really, really fun, but it is something worth pointing out. The bigger issue with the cards is that, like I said before, the art is really lovely, and I love that the 1s are smaller than the 2s, smaller than the 3s, and so on and so on and so on. But there are about 4 suits with a blue background, and sometimes if you're looking across the table, it can be quite hard to tell what set someone's collecting. Not to mention that when you have all these cards set out before you, it can really be a space hog, and you're going to have to kind of pile things up and what have you. But this is a much more minor issue than the being unable to identify the cards. I mean, I'm guessing if you're colourblind, you might find it even trickier. Yes, the art is different, and yes, the borders are different, but not different enough for my liking. And that's really the only thing I can say about it that isn't great. There's also, a couple of issues with player counts other than 5, because if you're playing with fewer players, you have to sit there and count out and take out different sets, and it's a trading game, and in a trading game, you almost always want more players. But overall, for a small box game, I don't think you can go wrong here. I paid €7.50 for it at Essen, and it's definitely worth that. I'd happily pay twice as much for it. It's definitely going to stay in my collection. I think it offers something a bit different to Arboretum and Lost Cities, but those are obviously two fantastic set collecting games that if you liked, you should maybe check out Matryoshka and vice versa.